I can't, it's like I have no rational reason for it, but it's like when it comes to that, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. I'm like, that's too much. I'm sure there are people who are like, no automobiles, only carriages, and I'm afraid that's me.
Well, after she was showing me how she's
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Great Falls International Airport Authority Board meeting. Today is November 26, 2024. The mission of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to optimize transportation services and development in our region. The vision of the Great Falls International Airport Authority is to maximize the airport's benefit to our region. Welcome to the public. Thank you all for being here. As always, we would love to hear what you have to say. If you do, please stand and identify yourself, and your comments will be heard. Let's start with a roll call. Commissioner Eritz. Here. Commissioner Gibbs. Here. Commissioner Hoven.
Present.
Commissioner Lalonde is present. Commissioner Swathwood.
Present.
Commissioner Thompson.
here.
And Commissioner Whiting.
Here.
All right, full house today. With that, I will call the meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll start with the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. This month, we have item A, approval of board meeting minutes from October 2024. Item B, payroll checks totaling $117,540.31 for October 2024. Item C, maintenance and operations of checks number 28600 to 28657 totaling $578,249.64 for October 2024. Item D, approve passenger facility charge totaling $65,478.37 for October 2024. And item E, financial reports for October 2024. Does any board member have an item they would like to pull for further discussion or comment? All right, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Got a motion, any additional comments, and a second. All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. Director's report.
Yeah, happy November, everybody. Just briefly on the financials, we're nothing very noteworthy to point out there. We're at that point in the year where the passengers are starting to slow down, and the oddly enough, parking revenue climbs. That's a trend we normally see. So typically, parking revenue can be expected to be about $1 million a month. I'm sorry, $100,000 a month for the remainder of the fiscal year. June can often dip down below that, but our strong parking months are coming up. I've always chalked that up to a combination of the traffic shifting more to a local origin as opposed to a inbound. And then also, I think people are more reticent to ask the neighbors to drop them off at 4 in the morning when it's dark. So I think the combination of the two things probably has a lot to do with that, more business travel for the remainder of the year as opposed to leisure travel. So revenue is kind of where we expected it to be. The parking revenue is just right on track. So we'll actually probably outperform parking budget a little bit if we're on track now, because the rest of the year are the stronger months. The passenger-related things like food and beverage, we can always expect that to excel. The first half of the year, second half of the year, usually a lot quieter. As we get into January and February, those numbers tend to drop. So revenue looks good so far this year. On the expense side, it's kind of a similar thing. We stopped buying paint. We have our broom fill for the winter, so our supplies and materials budget tends to be overspent the first half of the year, and the back half of the year tends to slow down. Everything else is pretty much online, nothing real extraordinary there. So from a financial perspective, looks like a fairly normal year. Revenue seems strong so far. On the reserve front, the page looks like this. They're not numbered this time, but basically the reserves, we sit at $9.3 million, almost $9.4 million, which is strong. If many of you may recall, our reserve requirement, we try to keep over $2 million in reserves, so we have plenty of capital for things capital projects, a second phase of condos, those types of things that we see in the upcoming months that we'll be spending capital on. But for right now, the reserves are strong, so that's good news. On the passenger side, it looks like we'll end the year just under 190,000 passengers. October was a little bit of a disappointing month from a traffic perspective. We simply didn't have as many seats as we had the year prior, so for the first time in a number of months, traffic was down. But we are currently tracking up over 5% for the year, calendar year anyway. So if we can get to right around 190, slightly under 190, it'll be about our third busiest year behind the Frontier years 10 years ago, which is unfortunate, kind of the way traffic has been in Great Falls for a while. Without that population growth, we just don't see the growth that you're seeing in the other communities. So 190,000 would be a solid year for us, but it hurts a little bit that it was 10 years ago that we were last at that level. Nothing too exciting to report there. We did talk to United about the summer performance. We had a conference call with them last week. They reported that Denver did quite well. If you recall, the year prior, we had some 320s mixed in with the 319s. The 320s did not perform well. So this year, they kept us at 319s all summer, which we kept full. So they're looking at some potential if they can find the capacity to slip some 320s in after July. We kind of talked about the strength in Great Falls tends to be after July 4th. And so they're going to look to see if we might be able to get some of the 320s back because they did fill everything up in July and August. The other thing we noted in our call was that October, would have been 23 of October, they ran the Airbuses through about half the month, a little further than half the month, and they didn't perform great. But this year in October, they ran two ERJs at 76 seats apiece, and we overfilled. They ran about 90% load. So we're kind of in that unfortunate sweet spot, which you've heard me talk about this 1,000 times. We're a market that can't justify moving to a mainline airplane most of the year because we just don't have the traffic, but we're at the unfortunate spot where we have too much traffic for two 76-seaters. So they're going to look to potentially keep half of the month in an Airbus next year if they can find the capacity to give us a little bit more capacity in October, which would be good. Allegiant has told us they're going to run two Phoenix flights all summer. It's been since pre-COVID that we've had those Phoenix flights in the summertime. As we've talked about in the past, Allegiant, like every airline, was short on pilots and short on planes over the last 5 years, and so they took those planes to markets like Florida that performed well in the summer, and really emphasized a lot of their California summer routes, Florida summer routes, things that did well in the summer. And obviously Phoenix is not a particularly strong summer market, so we saw that reduction. They are bringing back those two week flights for next summer. They tell us so far. And that's great because we do get quite a few second homeowners that often ask about that flight leaving every summer. And it seems like a seasonal panic that somehow Allegiant's leaving Great Falls, which we've heard for, it's been 8 years or so that rumor's been out there. It's just simply that they're making more money elsewhere. So we're anxious to see those planes come back. That'll give us a little bit more summer capacity. I don't expect any big moves from anyone else. Alaska has a brand new team of route planners, so I plan to get in contact with them and talk to them about next summer. Ideally, we'll see the second flight come back next summer. I'm sure they'll be back. They performed quite well on that. They cut it short this year. They had it in the schedule into November, and they stopped it after Labor Day because of the plane shortage. They were affected by 737 deliveries. And so they put the ERJs on routes that normally have a 7-3 because they're short on capacity. So hopefully next summer that'll be solved and we'll see that flight continue at least into October. so we can have that additional capacity. Again, like the United situation, we're in that unfortunate phase with the size of the planes back 20 years ago when you had dashes and Dash 8s and 40 seat capacity planes, the Saab prior to that, even smaller. Horizon could mix in several flights a day in a market our size. Now their smallest plane is 76 seats, and our market isn't big enough to have 76 seats twice a day. So we're in that unfortunate phase of not being able to justify 2 flights all year. Obviously, when you get into seasonal, that's a market they're less committed to. So they bounce back and forth between 1 and 2 flights when they have the capacity for us. So next summer so far, shaping up to be a little bit more capacity, but nothing too exciting for summer 25 that I can see. Rod has announced a retirement date. Rod, you want to share that with folks?
February 3rd is the last day.
2026?
No.
Here's some blank.
Congratulations, Rod.
So we've got one more meeting, obviously, with Rod, and then, of course, the Christmas party. But one more official meeting with Rod. And are you here that day, though, Rod? You've got some time planned off in January?
Taking some Fridays off. So.
Taking some Fridays off? Okay, so so hopefully, you never know, you might be feeling ill next January meeting, but hopefully we'll see Rod one more time in this room before things are over. So we have hired a new assistant director of ops and maintenance, Brian Cowles is his name, and he'll be coming to us from Pierre, where he's the director right now. You may recall Pierre lost air service, it's during COVID. It was prior to him getting there, and so he'll be coming over to us on December 16th. So hopefully we'll have him at the holiday party, so you all can meet him. He has a long resume of experience with Wichita, where he was in their ops department. Wichita's a longtime client of mine. Well-run airport, terrific group out there, some really top shelf talent, and he comes highly recommended from them. So I'm excited to have him on board too. Our private hangars, you may recall, I think it was last month or the month prior, there was some concern over getting permits in time for construction. We now have permits. I don't know if there's time for construction. Looks like that window is closing quickly, but the one hangar does have the floor in, and they're working on walls, so they'll probably get enclosed this year. I haven't been down. Did Gon try to do anything?
Not yet. They moved some equipment in. We got the fence moved for them, but I haven't seen any dirt moved yet.
The ground's probably not frozen yet, so he might still have an opportunity to get some concrete. I know there's some concrete being poured out at Malmstrom late in the season, so there might be an opportunity for him to continue forward and get some foundation in before they call it a year. So we'll see. Let's see what else I got here. We're having good discussions with our top prospect for Phase 2 condos. It's the same prospect that was out on Phase 1. And they met with the state last week to talk about some funding. I really think they're exactly the type of business that the state would want to fund. They're a local Montana company with a great brand, using Montana-made materials. Seems to me like that's the kind of thing you'd want to get behind. So I'm hopeful they can find a way to secure some financing from the state to help make this a reality. They're very excited about the project. We met with Dick Anderson a few weeks ago and really went through some terrific cost-cutting ideas based on, now that we're in the planning stage, it gives us the opportunity to kind of adjust the building to what they might want. We're looking at a long-term lease. So I think the customizations we'd be making to that building would be worth it, because they're going to have that building hopefully for 40 years, maybe longer. We would do a lease-to-own type of arrangement to help make that a better financing for them, which would benefit us because we lock in a long-term tenant out there, and this tenant would really get that business park started. So I'm super excited about that. We'll continue to bug them as much as we can to get them moving along. There's a chance, an outside chance, that we might ask for the December meeting, the day of the Christmas party, in order to put their lease on the board meeting. We also have the audit out there, which we can talk about too. Obviously, we didn't get the draft audit to the board today. We have not even met with the finance committee. The MD&A is not done yet. We're working on that now, so ideally, over the next couple of weeks, next week or so, we'll get the MD&A written, and then can meet with the finance committee, and then we have essentially the same board for January, so my recommendation is we just plan to put that on the January agenda and adopt the audit then, since we don't have any turnover. I know in the past there's been reservations about going into the next year if we have new board members in particular, because obviously we're asking them to vote on a document for a year they have not any experience with. So, our new appointment this year came right at the end of the fiscal year, so we're kind of in that boat already, no matter when we adopt the audit. So I think January is probably a safe bet. But if we wanted to try for a December meeting, we could also do that and have a brief meeting prior to the holiday party. I think I would just wait until January to give us more time to iron out everything and any questions that the finance committee might have. But we can certainly talk about that further.
Overall, since we are with the new firm this year, has it gone okay? I mean, obviously, there's gonna be hiccups when you go to the new firm, but.
We're their second airport, and so there've been a lot of questions and just like educating them on how things are, and a lot of back and forth, because they only spent 2 days in-house with us, so I would recommend next year they spend 3 or 4 days with us, just to answer some of those questions in person.
Spent 2 days
Mhm.
as a new account.
Yeah. We've been doing a lot via email. It's most of my time right now is all audit, but just educating them on kind of how our leases work and that kind of stuff, so.
Okay.
But it's been pretty good. They've been really good to work
No
with.
major issues with them, other than
No.
just education.
Yeah, and they just haven't done too many audits that are with the PSC, with the single audit, stuff like that with airports, so they just have questions that our old auditors have done our audit.
I don't know if they have a very much of a municipal
I don't think so.
portfolio at all.
Mm-mm.
So I think, kind of, local government is a newer
Yeah,
practice for them, and of course, it's impossible to find. I think even the city had some issues getting proposals. That is one of the tough parts of finding somebody to audit, so I think there isn't a lot of experience, out there in the municipal realm. Let's see, and then the other thing I was gonna note, we have asked and been approved for a PFC extension to extend our current application, which would expire in March all the way to July, to give us time to get the current application done. We don't plan to collect that long on the application, we just wanna make sure we have time in there. What we can do is, once we have the new application approved, is we just won't apply anything to the old application and wait for the new one to be approved. Let that mount up for a few months and then go back and apply it to the new application, so we can continue to collect without a lapse in there. So we're working with that, with the FAA right now to get the application approved. They have the application in hand. They have as you can imagine, a whole lot of process. They like to see that we have the airspace kind of figured out on some of the projects. They even asked for an environmental review on the passenger screeners, which I'm sure I think that was just a misunderstanding of what we were asking about. But, those obviously would be inside the existing building. We wouldn't be disturbing any new space or anything like that. So I think we just gotta kind of get them up to speed on what we wanna do. And the airline consultation, we notified the airlines we're gonna have that on January 7th. Thank you. January 7th, so we'll meet with them. We don't expect any objections. Was there for a while. They objected to every airport that had a 450 PFC, but that was many years ago, and I don't think there's much of an appetite to argue with us about the projects, because most of the stuff is pretty much directly related to passenger activities. So I expect that we'll probably have a consultation meeting. They'll ask some questions, and that'll be the end of the airline portion of the consultation. And that's on what I have on that front. On the construction side, as you can see, we are not going to be done by Thanksgiving, which was our suspicion for some time. But the paneling out front has been going very slowly. Actually, this week, I think we've seen more activity than we've seen in months and months in terms of the folks that are installing the paneling on the canopy. The column wraps are in fabrication. They're supposed to be here next week, I think, aren't they?
Yeah, they're being built right now.
Being built right now, so the wraps that go around the columns will be here on site shortly, which is one of the last things I think Dick Anderson has to do themselves out there. Most of it's just that paneling. So if they can get a full crew here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully they'll pick up the pace a little bit and get that wrapped up. Allegedly, the west vestibule is going to open today.
Tomorrow.
Oh, it's now tomorrow?
Well, I think it's tomorrow, yeah.
I thought it was, yeah, maybe tomorrow. Ideally we'll get that open, so the passengers can get out to the rental car lot without going all the way around. That's for the most part done. If you go outside, most of the paneling's on there, and ready to go. I think there's a few more things that need to be done in the interior. They need to install the air curtain, which is the dryer thing that blows when you come in the door, because we're trying to break that suction we get when both those doors are open at the same time. Ideally we'll get it open tomorrow, and the west vestibule will be nearing completion. Up here on the second floor, you can see they've placed the fireplace now. The stone underneath is mostly done. They'll be receiving the mantle pieces that go on top of that very shortly in the next couple of days, so they can put that on top of the stack stone. And then they've got to put the cladding on the fireplace chimney, which isn't quite done yet, I don't think.
No, it's still being manufactured.
That may be a couple more weeks. The furniture is here, and they're beginning to set up some of the furniture up there, so we can expect to have that open, I would think, before Christmas, hopefully. That area will be back in operation. The flooring contractors up here fixing, if you looked closely at it, and how closely you've all looked, but where we routed in the new seam in the carpet, some of those radiuses were not radiuses. They had flat spots and protrusions and points. So we, working with Steve and the construction team, they've asked the contractor to come back in and smooth some of that out so it's even lines. It already looks much better than the tack strip we had, and it will function much better, but we want it to look good because that's the final solution for that area. We don't want to have to do anything different to it in the future, and it's fairly expensive to go in and router out that floor and put in the brass strip and everything that we did in order to get that to look right, so we want it to look right. The carpet's done, as you can see. Most things on the second floor are done. We're waiting on the signs. The contractor's actually been here to look at the locations with Rod and everybody. So we expect the signage to go up any time now on the second floor there. And then the lighting is kind of coming in bit by bit. All of the floodlights that shine up the wall, well, that used to shine up the wall, I think only a few are still working. Those will all be replaced with new sconce lighting. It's going to be really great looking stuff. I'm anxious to see that stuff get replaced. The things we had there, those shoebox lights, are very ugly, and the light wasn't great either. So everything will be LED, so they should have a very long life. And then we'll be replacing all that spot lighting up above too, as that lighting comes in. So the project will continue for a number of months as they get in there and do that lighting replacement, but the pace and the closures and that type of thing will be much less intrusive as we go on down through there. On the West Concourse, we continue to work with the design team on lining that project up, on ideas on how we cut the cost and that type of thing. We're progressing forward. The idea would be to have a package that goes out this year, so we can get the foundation and steel package bought. We want to get that done so that we have the project underway. It's not, bill funding, the future of bill funding in my mind is a little bit uncertain with the change in administrations. We'll have to see, but we want to make sure we get going on that project and not leave money on the table. So we'll start on a first package for that this year and finish that in 2026. Any other projects? Rod, do you have an update on the access control phase 2, where we are?
Well, we're getting pretty close to being done with that. They've got all the conduits and wiring ran, so we're waiting for some devices. They're out there working today, so I think it's moving along pretty well.
And now that'll pretty much wrap up all of the doors that we allow tenants to go through. That was kind of the idea of the phase 2, and then after that, I think we can take on the remaining doors at much more leisurely pace. We've got some janitor closets back there. We've got some doors in the breather room, all of which that we just have keys to. So eventually we'll want to convert those, but we can kind of do them onesie, twosie. The locks that we have on many of those doors are very expensive locks. And many of them are very old. We've got quite an inventory of them now because as we've taken those locks off other doors, we have some spares. But just to give you an idea, some of the cipher locks we have, and those are $700-800 locks, so they
Yeah, close to $1,000.
close to $1,000. So it's not any cheaper than the electronic stuff we're putting in. So obviously proliferating those into the future doesn't make sense. As things break, the best thing for us to do is just to go ahead and replace them with the new stuff. So we'll attack those janitor doors and internal doors kind of probably a number of different ways through the small capital projects in the budget. When we do the operating budget every year, as things break, we'll replace them through the operating budget. Things like that to kind of round out those last few doors. And then eventually we'll expand that program out to the snow facility so that we can have the same type of badge access everywhere. And then also the GA gates will be the next line of attack too, where we start to replace some of the clickers we use with badge readers. And that'll probably be a separate project when we get to what we call the AOA, the aircraft operating area, which is different than the SIDA, which is the secure area of the airport where the airplanes are. We'll probably do a bigger project for AOA and try to get a bunch of the main gates done at once before we kind of go into a maintenance mode and do a onesie, twosie. So we'll still be doing access control, I imagine, 5, maybe even 10 years from now. Because we have a lot of doors and gates, but the main ones in the building here where we allow other people to use them will be complete with phase 2, so that's encouraging. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much it. We've got the passenger gate just about done down here, or I mean the vehicle gate. Gate 4 down here, we put new lights there and cameras and a new gate. That's just about ready to go.
That's our one gate that opens to the SIDA area, the sterile area. So we've got a kind of a camera trap down there where we can do visual inspections remotely, just kind of adding to our ability to inspect. We do random inspections anyway, but this gives us yet another option where we can do randoms plus do some remote checks and have them open the panels up, see what's in there, that type of thing. And then also we can start to let some of the tenants use that gate again. Right now they're dragging the trash through the building from the airplanes, and as you can imagine, that's a bunch of half-empty cans and sloppy stuff. And so ideally, the better way of doing that would be to let them drive tugs out to the trash can, and just put the trash on the truck on the tug when you're done, and drive it out to keep it out of the building. And so with this improvement here, we can do some of those types of things. Where we can give them access to that so they can go out and back in. And then when Not Me breaks the gate or leaves it open, we'll know exactly who Not Me is this time. And that's all I've got on the director's report. Did I miss anything, guys?
SRE building.
On the
SRE building.
Oh,
No, it's on here, down the road here.
we've got it on the agenda. I thought we'd cover that there. All right, that's all I've got.
Comments or questions? All right, we'll move on to item number 1, passenger facility charge application number 6.
So application number 6, as I said, is a continuation of our PFC program. Help me out where I've done something wrong.
Towards the very back, are you just trying to look at yours?
I'm stuck. These agendas got too big.
They are huge. Are you just trying to look at?
Yeah, there we go. PFC application number 6. We've got some minor adjustments in here. We're gonna have to adjust the dates, as I said. It'll probably not be approved until sometime this spring, and then we'll kind of retroactively collect on it. But we plan to collect PFCs at the 450 level, which is what's the maximum level we can collect at. And we anticipate over the life of the program, we'll collect somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.2. Let's see that in here. 3.6. 2.6, well, it says 2.7, but 2.8 almost, over the life of a 5-year PFC application. And so the PFC collections last a total of 5 years that we can impose and use. So we'll be done collecting on that application somewhere near the end of 2028, the early part of 2029. And so we have already notified the airlines of our intent to impose and use PFCs under this application. We just have the public component of it, where we have to notify the public, and then the application goes before the FAA for approval. So we'll expect that approval will probably happen sometime in March timeframe. It has to go in the National Registers at 30 or 60 days. It's in the National Register for 30. Yeah. So there'll be a whole federal process to notify the public and on the PFC application.
Does anyone else do the 450?
Almost everyone does 450. There's I think still a couple of holdouts. It's like a handful of maybe 5 that don't impose a PFC. There was a long time ago a debate as to whether or not it's a local tax. That really has subsided, and I don't know that, like I said, there was about 5 that were there for a long time that were imposing anything. And then there were a few that didn't go to 350, or didn't go above 350. For about 20 years, the cap was 350. And then about 15 years ago, it's been now, they approved going to 450. It's still a hotly debated thing in the industry. The large hubs would like to pull the cap off completely. And it's been a long time since we've talked about it. We've actively campaigned against that for all the years I've been here. I'm sure Denver and Seattle would love to charge all of you $20 to pass through their airport, but you don't have any ability to really go before that board and say it's not fair. A lot of the infrastructure that gets paid for with that money in other airports you don't even use as a connecting passenger. If you're flying in and out of Denver or Phoenix, it's great. They have a subway terminal in the building, but chances are you're never going to use it. So it's always been my contention that if it's an important enough project, the airline should pay for it, and that gives you a level of scrutiny between the airport and the industry as to what a good project is. PFC applications, on the other hand, there's very little scrutiny. The airlines don't even get a chance to stop it. They get a chance to object. I'm not aware of any projects that have ever been objected to that have been overturned by the FAA. The FAA notes the comments, and that's about it. So it's an imperfect tool, and that I come from a background of having used PFCs overseas to pay for large projects. In Aruba, we put in a $20 PFC, but again, that's a community that they are responsible for their own economics. They're kind of the end of the line and the beginning of the line. Nobody's connecting in Aruba. Not entirely true. To get to Curacao, you kind of have to go there. But nonetheless, my point has always been, if we're going to entertain increasing PFCs beyond 450, then we ought to keep the connecting airport where it is today, so they get a piece of it, but not any more than 450. Today you can collect a maximum, I think it's 1850, something like that. It's an odd number. It's basically probably 450 times 3 plus 4.
Yeah, it's 4 legs.
Yeah, 4 legs. So you can collect a total of 450 times 4. And then if you happen to have 5 airports involved in your travel, then the connecting airports have to split that money. So if we pull the cap off completely, hypothetically a trip from here to Wichita, $9 for either end of it, then in the middle there was a 20 for Denver, that's a lot of money on your ticket that all of a sudden comes in. And so what I've said is, if we're going to increase beyond the 450, it ought to be on the origin airport only. And that makes me responsible for the economics of my community. And so, 450 for Wichita, sure, 450 for Denver, fine. But then if I want $20 here in Great Falls, it ought to be just on the origin leg of the ticket, and I ought to have to justify that to my community as to why I need $20, because that's where the money's collected, and then I would be responsible to my community politically to tell them I need $20. And the way it is now, like I said, those middle airports, you don't know you're getting hit for 450 in those communities. you would notice if all of a sudden your ticket was $20 or $40 more expensive, but where do you get the opportunity to retrieve that with anyone that's gonna listen and be in the decision chain? You really don't, you know, so almost everybody's at $450. I'm hopeful that we find a way to talk about origin-only PFC in the future, because all the airports say they need too much, you know, especially the big airports say they need more, right? But we don't have a giant blue horse, we don't have $1 billion hotel entry at our airport, we can't afford those things. You know, we don't have, you know, a solar farm that we've bought, you know, out there, you know, those are things that you don't get to say if they're reasonable or not as a traveler, and I don't think you should be paying for them unless you do. So, you know, yes, there are many airports at 450, that's a long answer. And there is an effort to go higher.
And you've got the pulse of the airlines a little bit, you already kind of talked about it, but.
We've already sent it, we haven't heard anything back from the airlines. Typically, if they hate the idea, we would have heard something by now. Delta is the chair of our airline, what do you call it, affairs committee, I think is what they call it, Airline Affairs Committee, AAC, I think is typically what it's called. And so they kind of are the watchdog for us, and we haven't heard a single comment. He's had it now since, gosh, when did we send out the first, October? And we haven't heard anything. So I think they largely think it's reasonable. We'll know for sure at the consultation. Every once in a while they kind of hide out and, you know, attack it once. But nothing we have in this application is very controversial. I mean, we're paying for things like the exit lane technology, which I think increasingly airports are likely to get stuck with as a mandate. At some point, TSA is already making noises that they want to stop doing anything with the exit lane. That was stopped for a period of time. Actually, Senator Tester was very instrumental in telling the TSA, no, you're not going to give up the exit lane and make it the airport's responsibility. But that could easily turn, and the TSA could decide, we're not doing anything with the exit lanes anymore. The airport, you have to staff it. And if they do that to us, it means right now we have to man somebody almost all the time that the checkpoint was open to do it. And so with this technology, you know, we can avoid that. And so I think it's you know, something that the airlines, you know, are going to want. The West Concourse, the airlines, Delta has long been unhappy with their hold room over there because of the funny angle it's on. So we know that they would like to see that remodeled. Both of them recognize the hold rooms are too small. United and Delta will be affected by that project. Recognize that hold room has shortcomings with the size of fleet that we have now. So I don't see that being a tremendously controversial project either. And obviously the roof, you know, that roof is what we've been fortunate with our wind, frankly. That roof has hung in there as long as it has, you know, and so I don't see them looking at any of those projects and saying that's ridiculous enough and you should pay for it a different way, or we don't want you to pay for that with PFCs because it doesn't concern us and it should be, you know, cargo landing fees or something. You know, the FedEx project that is on there, the airlines are aware that FedEx pays half of our landing fees here. And so we have kind of an issue over there that's got to get solved. We don't want to put it in the landing fee because then they would pay the other half. So this is a way we can kind of abate that rate impact to them by using some PFC revenue for that too. So I think we'll see, I don't want to say wild support, but I think we'll see good support from the airlines on these projects, and I would be very surprised if we get an objection.
What about the public perception?
You know, I think PFCs have long been there. You know, there are two charges, and I don't know that every traveler recognizes them. There's actually three. So, you know, if you look at your actual ticket at the fair, there's a federal tax on there that you pay. That goes what pays for our entitlement and discretionary funds in the AIP program. That's like 18%, isn't it? I think still. So that's long been like 18% of your ticket. And then PFCs were put in place, let's see, so when I first started my career, it would have been like 92, I believe, 92, 94, 96, somewhere in there. So they've been in the market for a very long time. They started, I believe, at 250, and went almost immediately to 350 in the first 5 or 6 years. Then they got stuck at 450, and they've been there for at least 20 years. You know, it's a known thing. It's on your ticket. It's disclosed every single time. I don't think the public really views that as anything unusual. The other charge that a lot of people don't know about is the CFCs, which is the customer facility charge on rental cars. You know, we have a fairly moderate one. I have actually rented cars in several towns where the CFC was more than the daily rate. You know, Seattle's one comes to mind, because they built a whole huge facility that you have to take a bus to. Well, actually now you can take the train. It was $140 million or something, and so, you know, there are those fees out there, kind of user fees, that exist in the industry. It's pretty well tolerated, and you hear very few objections to it. So I don't expect, I mean, we certainly could, I mean, I would expect them to, you know, be here today, because it's the second time we've discussed PFCs, if they were gonna object. So I don't think the public will object to it. You know, the passenger facility charge program is almost a locally administered use fee. You know, pretty much is how it functions, just like a stadium tax or anything that you would have in a town where they're trying to afford infrastructure outside of their normal tax roll. It keeps you from using, in many communities, not us because we're not attached to the city, but Colorado Springs and other places where you might use some property tax, that PFCs have really prevented that. The need for that, and so I think, you know, in my mind, a user fee like that, a reasonable user fee, is a good tool to provide airports the funding they need to do projects.
Any other comments or questions on the PFC application? Straightforward. All right, can I have a motion to approve passenger facility charge application number 6? Got a motion? Any additional comments or questions? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. All right, moving on, item number 2, capital improvement SRE expansion.
Yep, so the SRE building has been done in 2 phases thus far. The first phase was just 3 days, the second phase added 3 more days, and now we're looking to do phase 3, which would be 3 more days. This time around, we want to make sure those 3 days are full size, 30-foot days, and so the building may end up being a little bit longer on the in wall than the last 2 phases, because we want to be able to get the next 3 bays will be primarily storage bays for our bigger equipment, and so we want that full length. But the idea, when we moved the building down there, we wanted to use federal dollars to set up a new shop. Obviously, this end of the airfield is fully developed, there isn't room for it. So we moved down there, it allowed us to take the utilities all the way down to the southwest GA area, which now we have a number of hangars that are on those utilities and more underway. So the electric and the water and the sewer that went down there really enabled Eagle Jet and other projects. And so the second phase allowed us to move what I would call our daily fleet in there. Pretty much the stuff we use on a daily basis is down there. Sometimes we don't have the ramp hog down there, it's still down at this old shop. With this phase, we'll pretty much move everything down into our existing building, and we'll have everything in one place, which was always the end goal. We knew it would take a number of phases. I see this kind of as the terminus of the SRE expansions. Probably beyond this, we'll be looking at some lower slung building, maybe just a simple stick-built garage, so we can put our small equipment in, our Bobcats and our pickup trucks and things like that to get them out of the weather until we have need for more large equipment. But pretty much the 10-year fleet plan we drafted back, 10 years ago, we've completed that fleet plan. We've bought all the equipment that is, kind of our mainline equipment. And the nice thing is it's spaced pretty evenly over that 10 years. So now as we look maybe 5 or 10 years into the future, we'll be replacing equipment kind of onesie twosie to replace individual pieces as opposed to having a big fleet plan we have to complete in order to get our full fleet that we need to operate. But the SRE building, once we move into that and get our equipment out of the old building, our plan would be to lease that building to one of the tenants down there. In the past, we've had interest from both AvMax and Fleet Supply, or Fleet Maintenance, and I'm sure there's probably some other folks that would be interested in that building too. It's a nice little shop, but it's only 40 feet deep, So most of our equipment, of our current equipment doesn't fit in it. We'll look to move, get everything in that new building, and then potentially lease the old building. That would kind of get our equipment out of that into the airport.
How long has it been since Avmex and Fleet Maintenance expressed interest in the additional lease space?
Fleet Maintenance was
We
just
talking like
last
a year? Or?
Yeah, Fleet has been recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been talking to Avmax for a couple of years.
And of course, they've gone through some changes in ownership and business plans. They use the other half of that building currently for kind of parks facility. So they kind of store all kinds of bits and pieces in there. So I don't know if they have more need for that. Right after we leased them that, they were really barking at us. They'd like to have the other half of it, but of course we didn't have where to put our stuff, so we couldn't do it at the time. But now, I think we'll be able to, get them in that facility if they still want it, or maybe Fleet would want it. It's easy to divide in half. There's actually a demising wall in there, so it wouldn't be too hard for us to split that building down the middle. And we still get, a lot of people calling us looking for shop space. They probably don't have quite enough business to afford maybe one of the new condos, but they could use something, and that building, there's just nothing like that in town. You can get city water and sewer and have a nice shop, so. The project's gonna be about $2.44 million. That'll be our big AIP project. For next year, we have our regular AIPs and then the money we loaned Bozeman last year. The good news is we only have to match that at half, because it's what we call a double entitlement year. So instead of having a 10% match, we only have 5. So you can see the local match is only $122,000 on that, and we'll put that into the airline landing fees and recover that back.
And the paint will be whatever's on sale at the time.
That was sort of happened to us with Talcott construction. The original yellow building, that was supposedly the only color they did.
Oh, yeah.
So next time you see Brad.
All right, any additional comments or questions on the SRE expansion? All right, can I have a motion to authorize design and construction of phase 3 of the snow removal equipment building for a cost not to exceed $2.44 million?
So moved.
Got a motion, any additional comments or questions? Can I get a second?
Well, I have a question. Is this gonna be clear span?
Ideally, yeah. The last one was clear span. The one prior, there was columns, yeah. But the engineering changed between the two, and they actually told us it was much cheaper to build clear span last time. So we're hopeful. I think it's spec'd as clear span. It might be a value engineering thing. We consider dropping poles in there, but we really would much rather have clear span.
I think part of the reason that you had those center columns was for that crane.
Crane, that's true too. So the original bays, we have the ability to put a bridge crane in there. For instance, when we lift those giant broom, things up, they're like 4 feet long, and we take the individual wafers that you build the broom out of come off one at a time. And so it's very cumbersome. And so, the bridge crane would be really great because we could pull a broom in, lift up that spool, pull all the things off of it, and then put them back on, build them in place. What we're doing now is trying to tip the whole thing up and load it from the top, with a kind of little scaffolding thing that JJ built. Not ideal. And so obviously we ever had to take an engine out or something like that. We really don't have the capability of those big machines right now to do that. So with this phase, one of the add options is to buy a bridge crane that would go across those whole phase. We also have a generator in there in this phase. The building's already wired and everything. We have the pad, we have everything set. It's just in the first phase, we couldn't afford to build the generator, buy the generator to go in the first phase of the building. So we're hopeful in this phase with this budget, we can get both the bridge crane done and the generator.
Okay.
used to be we lost power down there a lot. It's not as bad anymore, so.
Not as bad as, well, the terminal's not too bad, the other end down by our old shops, Max, and that loses power a lot down there.
All right, good question. Any additional comments or questions? Can I get a second?
I'll move.
We already got a motion on this one.
Yeah, this would be a second.
Second, okay.
So we'll give a second motion.
Second. Perfect. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. All right, item number 3, airport capital improvement plan.
Yes, every year we file a capital improvement plan with the FAA, and typically it's a 7-year plan or a 6-year plan, depending on how you view it, the year you're already in. And so we keep this on file with the FAA to kind of let them know what we have coming up so they can plan grants going forward, kind of give us an idea what our chances are of getting any discretionary money we're asking for. Eligibility gives them kind of a look ahead, so you know, we're not right to the last minute fighting with them over whether or not a project's eligible. And so this is our current CIP, and this practically changes every month as we move along, and you know, we have priorities that change on the project side. You know, we get a major seam opening up somewhere in the taxiway. We thought we had 5 more years. We got to reshuffle and bring that project up. Or maybe we have a safety concern, like the VSR road that's on, vehicle service road that's on there. We've been trying to structure a deal with MAG so we can get across their ramp and get cars off of the taxiway so they can go across the MAG ramp and then get onto a new vehicle service road we would build around to our snow shop and then over to Eagle Jet. So, you know, if we were to somehow get a deal from MAG, we'd want to probably move that project up in time to try and take advantage of that deal while, you know, get it while the getting's good kind of thing. So there's things like that that move from year to year. So at any given point, it's just our snapshot of projects we foresee coming up. And this is our current snapshot that the FAA met with us on in October. And we'd just like to adopt it as an official CIP. We'll be back again next year to relook at the entire thing. Priorities will undoubtedly change and things will move around. But as we see it today, this is what we think we've got on tap for the next 7 years.
Questions or comments? By group today. All right, can I get a motion to approve the airport capital improvement plan?
Make the motion.
Got a motion. Any additional comments or questions?
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. All right, item number 4, capital project canopy and west vestibule project budget revision.
It's printed poorly, but essentially, we're coming back to the board to change the budget on this project. We had a number of unforeseen circumstances. We found that elevator bank underneath the carpet, which no one knew about. Rod remembered it, I think, once we found it.
Yeah, I just didn't remember being the condition it was. Remembered the elevator.
Yeah, I mean, the oddest place for an elevator, but nonetheless, it's there, and so we had to jackhammer that out completely because it was in the uncarpeted area, and tear out the concrete and put in terrazzo. We also found a floor seam. We were talking about that today. It looks like at one point they must have built a pretty beefy wall for the rental car guys closer into the baggage claim in there, and then during a remodel back them up into what used to be the FIS facility along the back wall, and so there was not even a floor seam in there. Surprised that I'd never noticed it because there was quite a bit of slope in there, but it was in excess of what we could put back in place. It was definitely a tripping hazard, so they had to bust that out and re-feather that in before they recarpeted that area. And so a number of conditions on the construction that were somewhat of a surprise. There's sort of another category of we had planned to put some concrete around the bases of the columns out front. So the contractor prefabbed some concrete panels. The rough surface of that concrete, when we started trying to line them up, was gonna leave a pretty big gap on all the corners that didn't look well. In addition, that green concrete was very prone to scratching. They had made a couple samples, and when we went out with a screwdriver, if you just drug it across, it would just gouge the entire thing. And so the main goal of those bases is to protect the concrete bases out there from further damage. We've had a few cars and a couple of our blades hit them, and we wanted to provide a different look, but also protect those bases, and that was not going to do a good job of it. And so we decided to change some of that methodology and stack stone them instead. That alone was about a $10,500 change order there. We had to add some fireproofing. When we got kind of to the exterior portion of that new vestibule, it was always outside, but now it's sort of a semi-interior as opposed to a kind of an exterior vestibule. So we had to fireproof that decking under there. Whether it should have been fireproof before or not, I can't tell you, but we obviously had to do that. There was an expansion joint that we expected to encounter that we did not encounter, so that was a negative $7,500. And then there's the other category of kind of things that disappeared during design that we had in earlier phases, but when it went to bid, they were out. For instance, we wanted to replace the carpet in the middle of the bag plane. That was about $8,000 to replace those two sets of carpet. Obviously, we replaced all the carpet downstairs, leaving the old blue carpet in there would have looked odd. So we needed to replace that. The exterior signage on the front of the building got dropped out of the plans during, at some point before it was bid. We had it up into a certain stage of design. We should already had talked about what the signs would look like. We had some ideas on the technical, how to light it, all that, but then it didn't make it into the bid documents. And so we discovered that a couple of months ago as we asked the contractor about the signage, and they said, what signage? We realized that was an issue. And then the other thing too is the rough surface of that concrete. If you recall, especially in the middle, they cut that at some point. They just went in and cut a section of the middle out to put in that sun room kind of in the terminal there, and there was a big lip in there. Even the rough forming of the way that was built, there's a lot of undulations in the concrete, and so they had to build out furring from that in order to put these straight panels on, because there was so much inconsistency in the surface of the exterior. Even in places the concrete from the form was bowed, like concrete will do if it's heavy. So that when you look down the surface of that, the front canopy there, you can actually see that it kind of bows out where the form wasn't as strong, and the concrete obviously fills the void, and then you have a little bit of bowing. And so that required more furring because we're putting a straight piece of metal over it. So there was quite a bit of additional furring that had to be added to the project. That was about or about $9,100 to do that. And so in total, we end up, we've exceeded the budget by about $289,000 beyond what we had brought to the board back when the project was approved. And we need to come back and pick that up. Obviously, we're pretty far down construction on this, and we probably should have come sooner as we realize these individual issues, some of which are fairly new issues, but certainly we could have come sooner. Could have come to you sooner with a number of these issues like the elevator and other things. As we're getting to the back end of the project, we see what's left. It looks like we're going to need a little bit more money. So, yeah.
John, any type of these projects, there's things you control, things you can't control. I understand things you can't control, but the one that concerns me is the quality of the review of the bids. And missing that, that's a big miss. And who does that? Who does that review?
Well, I mean, I don't know if did we ever do, what percentage design did we do a walkthrough on, Steve, do you remember?
I think we were at 65%.
We didn't do a 90 or 100%.
No.
And that's one thing, that in midway through this project, I told the design team, we absolutely have to do a 100% walkthrough of the design plans because of things like this. I mean, we had talked about those signs, and then the signs don't get bid. And so this project was, we were kind of late getting it designed. If you remember, we actually had hoped to construct it a year prior, but the design just wasn't getting there quick enough. And so, there was, we were under pressure to get it bid. The grant was uncertain. The bill funding has not come at the time we thought it was going to come. It's just been a little bit of initially FAA told us the money would be available anytime, and then as it's turned out, they're treating it just like the AIP program, which has dedicated timelines of when it's likely to be available, when you have to have design in, and all those things. And so the design was under quite a bit of pressure, from a time perspective to get done, and we didn't complete that 100% that we normally go through in doing the design. So I think from the 60% design walkthrough that we all did, because I remember that's when we talked about the signs, and I remember one of the comments was it can't stick too far off the building because an RV will chop it right off. So we were at a very detailed level of discussion, and then when that bid packet went out, they weren't in there. And so some of the things are less foreseeable. You really have to spend the time out there to probably really spend the time out there looking at it to realize the level of furring that was going to be necessary. I think the architects probably took it for granted that the front of it was straight, but obviously it wasn't, and so we have to pay the contractor for that additional work. It's probably given that it's a rough built facility, we probably should have had some allowance in there for that type of thing, because none of the surfaces are what would you call it?
There's like the corner.
Standard. Yeah.
Was the architect on site? Or did he do it all pictures?
LPW, yeah.
So,
This is
listen,
high.
you're implementing the 100% review.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do 100% review in the future, because, to me, this is just way too much of a miss. Like I said, some of it's, you can kind of say, okay, yeah, I get it, there's an inch probably between, this side, the irregularity, and the other side, the irregularity, that, in your head, it doesn't really come to you, oh yeah, we should probably plan an inch of extra room because of all the irregularity in there. But of course, you also know what you're dealing with the way that was built. There's gonna be some.
I was just wondering where the miss happened.
Yeah, it was in the plan set, we talked about it, and then when it went out to the bid, they got dropped in that.
Okay.
When you're talking about almost a 20% error, that just seems.
It's just under 10, it's what, 8 or
You
something.
said 280, right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I read the
Total.
wrong number.
That's
It's $100,000 difference in.
Okay, that's what I was reading, but then you said 280, and my level of concern got much higher.
I read the wrong number.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, we should have, the elevator's unforeseeable, and, those things happen. Things aren't where you expect them to be, and, but certainly on the design stuff, and even really the columns, I feel like if we would have gone through that 100% design, and said, because what was spec to the contractor was basically, you have to put concrete around the base. And so the way they decided to do that, because they could do it all off-site, was to form, these standard panels that then they could fit together, because that was easiest, right? Down at the construction yard, they make one form and they pour it a bunch of times, and bingo, you've got your part.
But that's a risk they're assuming versus pouring in place, which guarantees fit.
Right.
At some point, as a private citizen, contractor's not gonna get away with that in the private world. Feeding at the trough of a government entity such as the airport, they probably think they can, which is, the flag I'm waving now is, again, elevator pad unforeseeable.
Right.
Contractor error
See, I wouldn't,
is his liability.
I wouldn't put that in contractor error. I would say that's a design error. You either dictate means and methods or you don't. And so, what he did would have worked. I mean, we could have put those things on there, it just would have looked like hell. You know, I mean, we would have had unstandard gaps the entire, down every seam and on the bottom. You know, it just would not have looked great.
So was it?
I mean, that's why we hire architects and engineering companies,
Yeah.
and they hire contractors with reputations, experience, and capability.
But we're in
I
a
mean-
low bid environment, I mean, yeah, so you know, and that's what I'm saying, to me, you know, the way that should have been spec'd in the plan is, you know, number one, you either fur it out further, so that if that form would have been another inch longer, you could have stood it off from the column and made those seams almost impossible to detect, just would have routed the seam and it would look like a concrete, you know, piece, you know, or poured in place, which is what, you know, I would have preferred, is go out, pour a footer on the bottom of that, and, you know, make it the same in every instance. You know, but again, I mean, to me, the way it was spec'd, it just basically said, you have to provide the means and methods. You know, unless you give them the specific direction of how to attach something or build it, you know, it's gonna be difficult to assess liability in a lawsuit.
Right. But this is the big difference between spending your money or spending somebody else's money. Right now, we're spending the airport's money, which is somebody else's money, which I prefer customers that are spending other people's money, because you can screw up and still charge them, which is what I'm seeing happening here, and it's offensive to me, right? Because most of my customers are private people who, when home equipment screws up, they look at me to make it right. And I'm just struggling to see where the airport screwed up when we hired architects, engineering firms, and competent contractors. That's my point. I'm struggling to understand. You're not an engineer, you're not an architect, you're not a contractor, you're the money man.
LPW should make it right.
I have to
That's,
echo,
that's my opinion. I'm struggling to understand why we're forking out another $100,000.
in significant part, I have to echo Commissioner Hoven's concern here. So help me understand really quick, so Morrison Merrily is is the airport's engineer, and so they hired LPW for this, or?
No, LPW, and it was so we have an architecture
Okay.
component of the engineering contract, right?
Right.
So that team comes in and says, you know, we're your team, you know, and we selected, you know, that team for the 5-year service contract.
So LPW was selected by?
Us.
By us, okay. So LPW appears to have made a mistake, that happens. I imagine they've already been paid for their services, but because of the quality of their product, now the airport is on the hook for $100,000. I mean, is there any mechanism to even open a conversation with the people who are actually responsible for $100,000 error?
No, I think that's a good point, and we've had that discussion a little bit with Steve and the team of, you know, I mean, what you're asking for is errors and omissions, you know, right? So, I mean, that's the formal process that you go through. And, you know, I think this is right at the threshold of errors and omissions. I mean, we have, you know, signs that disappeared in the bid set that, you know, we don't have in the program and are gonna be months behind. You know, things like that. I mean, some of the things, you know, like the columns, I mean, that one, I'm a little more, you know, reticent to say it's entirely on the design team. You know, that, you know, I mean, yes, the product that was gonna be out there, I think, was substandard. When the contractor hung those things and we looked at them, we all said, that's not any good. We don't wanna proceed with that and get that up there, because it's, number one, if somebody knocks one of those panels off, our guys are gonna have a heck of a time repairing it, because the whole thing has gotta come down and the fasteners are epoxied back in there. There's not a good way to get it off. So, you know, as we looked at it and said, okay, for $10,000, we can stack stone this, which is already consistent with what we've done inside. That seems like a better solution than putting these up that are gonna be a maintenance mess.
And I understand, and I definitely I think that was a good call. I think all of us would agree, like, that was the right call on behalf of the airport staff. But it seems like that's also the kind of thing that the architect should see coming. if you don't dictate a certain amount of means and methods, it's like, yeah, we're gonna tack some styrofoam there and, you know, we're gonna stucco the outside of it so it looks like concrete. And, well, you know, this is what the contract says we can do. So I feel like that just, again, it's like, again, it shifts the responsibility for this predicament that the airport finds itself in a little closer again to the architect's camp. That maybe the architect should have considered, by failing to dictate some means and methods here, the contractor realized they were legally allowed to implement a solution that the airport would ultimately find unacceptable. And so it's like, I'm with Commissioner Hoven on this, that it's like, I'm not convinced that because the architect made an error, everyone makes mistakes, that happens, but I'm not convinced that because the architect made an error, the airport needs to write the contractor a $100,000 check to fix the architect's error while the architect remains whole. I'm not a business person, but that just sounds wrong.
The rub I think we're gonna have is the architect's already been paid and our contract's with the contractor. So, I mean, we can't hold we approve the change orders.
Architects carry error and omission insurance.
Yeah, but to make that, to trip that trigger, I suspect we're gonna have to litigate, and then is it worth it, and do we wanna walk
And
that
the question has to be asked, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
But I think that should absolutely be a conversation that we have in depth before we decide, yep, here's $100K.
The problem is, the contractor's gotta proceed through the project and complete the project.
Okay.
You know, I mean, so, you know, I agree, I don't think Dick Anderson is responsible for the exterior signs. They did nothing wrong. You know, I don't think they're responsible for not putting the carpet in the bag claim. You know, again, they did nothing wrong. You know, same with the furring out there, as they got out there and looked at it, they said, well, it's not flat enough to put the panels you've told us to put up there, we've gotta build that off. You know, so no matter what, we're going to have to pay, you know, Dick Anderson for that work.
Fair.
You know, I mean, we could tell Dick Anderson, hey, you really goofed up the way you assumed that all these columns were the same width, and those panels you fabricated, you know, in advance because you were trying to speed up the project and have a uniform process and everything else. You shouldn't have done that, you know, but I'm not sure that's a fair way to treat Dick Anderson either. So, you know, this money that we're asking for, the additional $100,000, all goes to Dick Anderson. You know, I mean, you know, all of it it goes to Dick Anderson. None of it goes to LPW or Morrison and Merrily. Now, you know, on the back end of that, I think what I'm hearing from the board is you'd like us to open up an errors and omission discussion, you know, assuming, you know, that probably 18% of this project is soft cost, you know, right? I mean, so 1.5 million times, you know, 18% is about the total fee that the entire design team got, including Morrison and Merrily and LPW and RS&H and whoever else is on. Do you happen to know how much of a project it is?
So RS&H is the lead, they're the project manager, and Morrison Merrily are under LPW, or under RS&H. The total design fee for this project was more than $199,000.
And that is what the airport paid for the entire design.
Paid RS&H.
Paid RS&H, which included Morrison Merrily, LPW,
Yeah.
etc.
So there, like John's saying, there are some components, specifically the signs and the baggage claim carpet that's inside those baggage claim that would have been paid for regardless of whether they were left on the plans or not. What percentage, what the cost difference is, I'm sure there'd be some difference in there, because, you know, if a contractor can see a change order opportunity, there's a little extra money typically added to it. So what that number is, we don't know, but I would imagine if we went back to the design team and talked about the additional furring required, which, you know, could be subjective either way, but, you know, knowing how rough the form work was done and that you could definitely say that could have been handled better as a design team. That may be an area where we'd be able to have the discussion and feasibly give the airport some return on that extra money.
So it sounds like it's pretty unlikely that the airport could, get its full $100,000 back. I don't think that means that we should just throw up our hands and not go after it at all. Obviously, it's a matter for
Yeah.
further discussion, but
What
I
I
don't
would-
think we should just.
But what I would say is, not all of it is getting it back, right? I mean, so there's work that wasn't done.
Yeah, the signs are 60 grand and they would have just upped the original
Paid
bid by
something.
60 grand.
Right.
The carpet was 8,000, which would have upped it by 8,000. So those are material costs that we would have had. So in essence, where my indignation is all upset over $10,000 in the concrete forms, but still irks me.
No,
I still think it would be a good reason to remember it whenever the contract comes up to be renewed, because I just look at this as a huge swing and a miss, and I made 2% on a $1.5 million combine, right? These guys are making 18, good for them, good for them, but they work harder, well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. But
Plan's way less than a combine, but
I think having a conversation with the design team communicating the dissatisfaction of the board with what happened.
well, and that's why it's spelled out this way. I mean,
See what they say.
that's why it's spelled out this way. I'm pointing out, we have design errors. I mean, those are things that should have been in the project that are not in the project. And now, thus, that's why we're back here, is to say, okay, we have costs that we didn't account for because they weren't bid. And I agree, I mean, I think, we definitely have to think about, number one, I mean, we have to do 100% design review. We can't skip that step, obviously.
And who reviews the bids at that level? I mean, we get designs, or what do we get with the bids? We get a list of things, right? Someone has to review the bid and say, oh, the signs aren't in there.
So what happens in this case, how did we bid this one, Steve?
So it's a lump sum for the canopy and the west vestibule.
But there's no detail in sort of how they're costing it out.
No, that's how buildings are done. They're typically done by a specific skip.
It has to exist,
But how-
otherwise they wouldn't know what to bid, right?
They
Well,
put it together, but they don't show it.
well, they might, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that their line item costs, and so Dick Anderson probably, how many subs do you suppose he has on that? 4 or 5 at least.
Probably 12 total on this
Total,
project.
so he's going to each sub and saying, I need this built, I need that built, I need that built. So we don't ever see the sub pricing, so we don't know for sure what they bid. And occasionally, I mean, we had one a few years ago where we had a project bid, I think it was flat work, and, there was a protest because the fellow left something out of the bid, the low bid left something out. Well, then when we went back through the person protesting, they also left something out of the bid. So, I mean, it is common that there's not complete visibility as to what they just bid. But this one, was this done through the GCC contractor? No, this one was bid.
Low bid.
Did we get 2 bids? I can't remember.
We got 3 bids.
Got 3 bids. But yeah, typically in that case, not so much when we're using, the contractor risk model, because we don't ever do 100% plans. So Dick Anderson, like on the ticketing or West Vestibule, we won't do 100% plans. They'll bid off of what level of plan.
Yeah, we're looking at 75% for West Complex.
Yeah, so we'll do a 75% plan, then they did that, and then they're part of actually assembling the construction drawings. In the bid scenario where we low bid, we would do 100% plans. Typically, we would do a plan review at either 90 or 100, whenever the plans are ready for bid. We did a 60 this time. We were pressed to get the bid out. I can't remember, what was the deadline we were chasing on that? Do you remember?
The end of the year for the FAA.
Because the FAA closes accounting in September, like the second week of
Is there
September.
any language in that master contract for when someone on their side makes an error that they share in some level of the increased cost? Or they just looking at the airport as the big bank and say, are we gonna go back to the bank now?
That's the errors and omissions piece of the contract. So I mean, there is provision in there that, if they're forgetting things or doing it wrong.
I don't wanna sue anybody, but let's have a conversation and just see, there's obviously enough concern on the board.
Yeah.
I think we should recoup some of the Because we spend a lot of money there, they're our major
If only
Well,
just for the principal
expenditure thing.
And the FAA structure, unfortunately, and this is one of the objections I've always had to it, is you're locked into a 5-year contract. You know, they don't have a different mechanism for that. You know, so it's not like we can say, you know, this one sucked, we wanna use somebody else next year, you know.
Well, I mean, overall, they're doing good work. I mean, I've been impressed with what everybody on that team has done so far, but an error was made and, you know, admit it and say, okay, we're gonna do this to compensate.
Yeah, no,
I mean, I'm looking for a friendly solution.
I totally
to
agree.
a problem that could come up repeatedly. You never wanna go to court, because going to court's gonna cost more than probably what you're trying to recover.
And those contracts are not favorable to the builder
Yeah.
either.
If I understand what you're saying correctly, it's like having a discussion under the errors and omission clause, for lack of a better term, doesn't have to involve the courts at all. It's like, that's just a conversation between contract parties.
No, I think it's,
So it's
you know,
like-
and I mean, we've sort of started down that road a little bit already, you know, with our conversations with the design team, and I think, you know, we need, you know, to reemphasize, you know, look, I mean, you guys probably ought to do something to make this right, you know, because we have kind of a, you know, a crap sandwich, for lack of a better term, you know, with the end of this project, and, you know, again, the one thing I would emphasize, it's not a $100,000 issue, you know, there was work that just simply wasn't bid. You know, so what we thought we had when we brought in the bids and said, okay, we can afford this project, was missing, you know, $70,000 or $60,000 at least, $70,000 really with the carpet, was missing $70,000 of work that, you know, we thought was in there. I think probably even part of the design team. I mean, I assume, you know, all the way through LPW, they thought it was in there too. It just wasn't in there.
But still, it's like, if it wasn't in there and it should have been, I feel like
Right.
that's still.
Oh, I agree.
It's like, the airport still is, I don't know, damages is the wrong term,
Yeah.
but it's like, hey, this should have been in there, we were paying you to include details like this, and you didn't.
Right.
I mean, we're lucky we have the funds to cover it, otherwise, you know, what it would be. So we have to count on their bids
Right.
to be reasonably accurate.
Complete.
Yeah, I mean, so if there's cost overruns, I mean, we've had a few of them.
Well, you hit the
They're getting
elevator,
better.
I mean, yeah, it happens, I mean, you know, but yeah.
I don't know if there's been a project I've ever been on that doesn't have cost overrun, but,
We usually bring them in on budget, I mean, we've had a few, we've had to come back, especially today, there's several.
I mean, in general,
Yeah.
out there.
But
Okay.
My simple mind tells me there was excuse me, a design spec put into this contract that didn't guarantee an outcome. And that's the problem I have. They spec'd a design for these column wraps that didn't work out, and we're paying that for that design.
It
Does that make
could,
sense?
I think so, I mean, it could have been built. We weren't happy with the look and feel of it when it was spec'd out, put out there. You know, we looked at it and, you know, I think all of us said, you know, it's not gonna perform the way we want it to perform in terms of the durability. The concrete was pristine, I mean, it was as smooth and nice as this tabletop, but I mean, even a bag hitting it, and it's gonna begin to pock, especially on those corners where they're knife edge 45s, it's gonna pock, it's gonna delaminate, you know, we're gonna have, in 5 years, we're gonna have something that looks like it, well, not
Architects should know
necessarily.
that, I would think.
Yeah, and, you know, that, you know, was a means and methods that didn't work, and we should have been more specific, or just gone with stack stone from the onset, would have been a better way to do it.
So John, I guess my first question, just for the sake of trying to conduct business here, does this need to be approved this month, or are we gonna delay
Yes.
the whole project if we
I
don't?
mean, again, I don't think,
So
in
we
none
just-
of these instances, I mean, Dick Anderson probably could have built it differently, and maybe should have thought to build it differently, you know, but the fact is, they did do what they were told to do in a sense. You know, and we rejected it. I mean, it was, you know, your management team that went out there and said, it's not gonna perform the way we want it to perform, and we don't like the look of it, do something else. And so, I believe we need to approve the 100,000, pay Dick Anderson. You know, there are other things we're not paying them for, and there are things they've offered to do for free. You know, like for instance, there's a gutter out here, you know, again, probably should have been found in design, to have been routed a different way. That is, the way it's designed, it won't work. And Dick Anderson, you know, went out there and asked their subs, you know, for a change order, what the cost would be. The change order took forever to get, and Dick Anderson, just in the last meeting, said, we're gonna absorb it because we can't get you an answer in a timely fashion. So I mean, you know, there's definitely goodwill being put in by the contractor to solve problems out there. They've absorbed some of those costs. You know, I mean, another good example, right as the project started, because our grant was so delayed, it tripped over the entire year, you know, of the calendar year. And so all of their subs asked for escalation totaling, what, $40,000?
$14,000.
$14,000, and, you know, FEA will not allow escalation. So, you know, we've had to tell them, we can't pay for that. You know, I understand why you have it, because the grant we were told we were gonna get, you know, didn't materialize in the timeline we were told. You know, you have these real costs, but Dick Anderson has agreed to accept that one too. So I feel like Dick Anderson has done their best to deliver the project they did, you know, and they should be paid for it.
We
Is
went
that
back
fair,
to the
Rod?
FAA on the 14,000, because I feel that it was the FAA's fault that the installation, because they missed their own deadline.
Yep.
But they wouldn't back down.
Have you come?
I would like to make the motion that we approve the amount as requested with instructions to John and company to have a personal conversation, just to mention some of our concerns, and I think it's definitely worth keeping in the back of our pocket for future conversations. And like you said, I agree with what everybody's saying, absolutely, but I think we need to pay them for the work that's been done and let them know that we are concerned, and I think having the 90 to 100% walkthrough will prevent it hopefully from happening again in the future, and it will make them aware that we are concerned.
My only concern with that motion as presented is, I don't see anything actionable from a conversation to communicate concern to the architect. It's like, I would specifically like to see, you know, I agree with the, you know, pay Dick Anderson for the work that's been done. But I would also like to see specifically the director and his staff have conversations about errors and omission and some degree of basically paying the airport for the mistakes that were made. Not just communicating, hey, we are concerned, because they could just say, noted, you're concerned. It's like, we're concerned and we would like to discuss errors and omission. That would
We
be.
need to have a separate motion, because
Yeah.
I think paying the architect is one thing, and then our concern is,
Well, paying the
contractor,
contractor.
and dealing with the architect is a separate, whether we wanna send a letter or however we wanna deal with that.
Yeah.
I think that's the obvious thing, is let's pay the contractor and deal with the architect situation separately.
So can I make a
Yeah.
substitute motion?
Can you amend your motion?
Can I
Amended motion.
amend it? Can I amend my motion to just
Yeah.
say that, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the contractor for the additional amount? We'll just do one topic at
One
a
at a
time.
time, okay, I agree with that. Okay, so I have a motion for the board to approve the increased Canopy West vestibule budget to a total cost not to exceed $1.58 million. That's the motion with the acknowledgement that a separate issue, as you said, errors and omissions is potentially a separate discussion, so. That's the motion we have. Any additional comments or discussions on approving the budget?
But one question, do we have any order of magnitude percentage of, you know, so if this $70,000 of material costs or work that was left out, if it would have been bid, is there a 15% potential savings of that, or a 20% savings if it had been included in a $1.5 million project versus just a ad hoc, hey, I need some carpet laid? Do we have any idea of that order of magnitude?
We know what the carpet volume was. I mean, I would suspect, I mean, we know what we're paying per square foot. I would suspect there's no markup on the carpet. It's probably just the square foot unit cost times the additional space. You know, Steve, I don't know,
You
on the,
could do an alternate bid where you just requested a quote from the same contractor and that's gonna install it and what cost.
I mean, I was just, you know, every change order I've been associated with has been cost plus, you know, whatever it was, plus 25 to 30% more because you changed your mind.
I
And
think
it's been a huge profit center
yeah.
when I was in the contracting world.
I think the
I love
carpet,
them.
I think the carpet, we can easily do a per square foot takeoff of what was in the bid, and then how much additional volume was added, and get the board that answer pretty easily. The signs, we're actually getting 2 bids.
Yeah, we got quotes already for the signs without contractor markup on those, so, or installation, so we could have potentially a difference there as well.
Yeah, so that one, the signs, I mean, because we're going directly to the signage companies, you know, I don't feel like that, I mean, maybe, I can't imagine it would be much cheaper, because Dick Anderson isn't gonna give you a discount off whatever the
No, but now
subcontractor says.
You're the general, the airport staff is taking the responsibility of managing the, albeit significantly smaller, managing the project.
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the spirit of the entire project, I mean, sure, I mean, I think maybe there's a savings there that, you know, could have been achieved. Certainly the furring probably would have been cheaper, you know, I mean, I don't know that they would have even thought, you know, if you would have said, hey, look, we think this is an uneven surface, you're probably going to have to fur it out. Probably that one wouldn't have even been added in, because the contractor is just going to assume, okay, I get it, it's not even, I'm gonna have to build some of it out. You know, but as they get out there and they're planning to just put tack strips up and put the paneling up, now they're like, oh crap, that's not gonna work, we've gotta do more, you know, so I think you probably are, I mean, that one's probably 80%, you know, additional cost from what it would have been if it was bid directly. You know, but the other two, the carpet we can easily figure out, because we know what we paid per square foot for the carpet elsewhere in the building, so we can kind of look at that. I doubt there's a whole lot of markup on that. The signage, it should be pretty close to what was bid, because we're going directly to the companies and asking for bids. But
Just so everybody knows, it is a priority. We don't like to see this, even as a team member, it's embarrassing to really have this kind of extra cost come up, especially after the fact that it's been approved by the board multiple times. So we are going back, and we will have the discussion with RSMH and LPW and Morrison Maryland between the 3 of us, and we will include the airport staff, and we will see what we can do to make this right, because it is embarrassing and it should not happen, so I'll give you that assurance.
Okay. We've got a motion to approve the budget increase as requested. Any other additional comments?
I'll second it.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And nay. And the ayes have it. With that, so that was approved as requested. We won't take any further action on there, but John, if you could just have the discussion and maybe bring some information and answers
We'll come back.
as able next month, and then when that time comes, we can cross that bridge and take additional action as required. So. All right, good discussion. Item number 5, capital project, phase 2 access control budget revision.
This project's also in a similar status, we're over budget. There are a couple reasons for that. The original contract did not require federal wage rates. We now have to put them under federal wage rates, which are higher. They've also got to do certified payrolls, which means they have to make their employees available for interviews to ensure that they were paid what the wage rate they were supposed to be paid was. In addition, they have to pay, it's oftentimes odd positions in the organization that where the wage rate is below what the federal Davis-Bacon wage rate is. So they'll have to ensure that those people are paid in the right category and potentially paid more. Under the phase 1, we were keeping the same contractor for phase 2, obviously, because they are they're the local dealer for that particular technology. So we want to use them again. In addition, as we got out there, we identified an additional door that we wanted to wire up. the kitchen over there between Oakwells, or now Tailwinds. And the secure side has a legacy door that was always there. We go over and inspect the materials that come out of that door one by one, but we want to make that door so it can't be opened without an alarm, because obviously if they decided one day to open it on their own, we would have no way of knowing that today, and so we want to put a camera and the locks and that type of thing on there. And so we ended up with another door in the project that was originally planned when we did this phase 2, and we want to get all of the tenant doors done so we can be done with that phase. We had initially thought what we would just do is manage $250,000 and then have a third phase. But now we're so close to getting all the tenant doors done, it seems to make sense to get all the tenant doors done and not have a third phase. And then from here on, we'll just kind of do a onesie-twosie through the operating budget, or small capital in the operating budget every year. We can put forward a couple small projects under $40,000, which is what our airline agreement allows. So that's kind of the full reckoning of what happened on this project. And so we're asking the board to approve a new operating budget of $289,000 to complete the entirety of the phase 2 work.
And that will be the end of it, more or less.
It'll be the end of the tenant projects. Like I said, I don't expect we'll come back and do a phase 3. We'll probably just add them in, a couple a year on the operating budget to pick up. It's at that point just our janitor doors, or the breather room where only our guys have access. So we know if somebody leaves the door unlocked that we're going to get the TSA investigation. There's nothing to prove because we've done it. So we already have key control on that. We're not handing out those keys to anyone else. So it's not what I would call a necessity, but as those doors break, to replace the manual locks we have is as expensive as to put in the technology. And over time, it's just better to have the technology anyway, because then we can't have a full inventory of who's used the door, who left the door open specifically, that type of thing. So yeah, this is phase 2 kind of concludes what I would call the required components of the program, what TSA wants us to get done so that we can verify, we can detect and respond to security failures. The next phases are things like internal janitor closets, where we don't want to leave that door open because the janitor might have a razor blade in there that they use to get gum off the floor, and we don't want the public to have access to that. We haven't had a problem with people leaving doors unlocked, so it's not been an issue. But going forward, having detection on that door would be better. Higher level security, we want to get there, but it's nothing we need to progress at quickly in order to get the TSA happy with our security plan.
Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? Quiet again. All right, can I get a motion?
I will move that we increase the budget.
We'll go with that. We can put some more words in there, but we'll go with that. All right, got a motion. Any additional comments or questions? Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. Item number 6, capital project, terminal roof phase 2 and phase 3.
Yeah, this is a good story, believe it or not.
Oh, good.
Actually, the last one's not a bad story. And we realized we were much closer to finishing the tenant stuff, and so we want to get that extra door in there. But the roof bids came in favorable, more favorable than I think we had expected. So we'll be under budget on the what we call phase 1 component of that project significantly. But because the bids are favorable, and as we went up there and did the site inspection on the phase 1 portion of the roof, we realized phase 2 is in far worse condition than I think any of us expected. These rubber roofs, as they get to a certain lifespan, like your tires, you go from having good tires one day, then the next day you're like, oh man, this is bad. And so we're kind of at that point with that rubber roof. Enough of the oil has probably come out of it, it's become brittle. And so we have some spots up there that are starting to spider web and come apart. And so we'd like to go ahead, since we have good bids, and add to this project phases 2 and 3, which we'll fund through the PFC program. We have a little bit of authorization left in phase 1 because we're not going to spend as much as we expected on the first roof. So we've asked the FAA if we can just amend into that project the additional amount to bring the other phases in. And so we need about $288,000 of PFC money in order to help with that roof. We've also changed the funding plan here. We initially we're going to use just our reserves to save us some money on doing this project. We wouldn't have to do Davis-Bacon. We've elected instead to use bill funding to pay for a bulk of this project. So you can see we're allocating about $600,008 of our 2024 bill money towards this project. We'll use a little bit of next year's money, about $80,000, and then really the residual of the project beyond the $800,000 budget that was initially approved will all come from PFCs so we can finish 2 and 3. Once we get 2 and 3 done, we had to do the west portion of the building because of a wind storm we had. That's been 5 years ago or more, hasn't it, Rod?
Yeah.
So that part blew off and we had to repair it. The part that's above us right here is part of the 3rd floor. So that roof is newer than all the other phases because that 3rd floor was put in now almost 20 years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, that one's 20 years, and
About
these
20 years old. So we've
ones
got,
are replacing are close to 30 or over 30, so.
yeah, so we've got maybe 10, 15 years out of the portion over us. And then the concourse, at least the west concourse, that will be replaced with the expansion project. So kind of taking this piece of the core and getting 2 and 3, we'll have everything done along with the west concourse project. If that moves ahead, we'll get a new roof there. The only thing we'll have left is the east concourse that will need replaced going forward. So we think this is a good expansion of the project to get these 2 phases done. And with our new PFC application, we should be able to collect that money next year in order to pay ourselves back for that portion of the roof that will be PFC funded. And then we'll still have a small piece in there which we'll put in the terminal rent. That $68,000 will remain in the that's the matching portion of the federal grants. That will remain in the terminal rate and recovered from the airlines through the terminal rent.
So why among all things were these the first bids in 5 years to be so competitive?
Well, we attracted somebody from Spokane, and we often don't get anyone from out of the region. But as we talked about when we were kind of first talking about this project, these are kind of these dealer repped products. So you have the firms are a little more hungry because you have several different providers, and they're looking to compete in a broad area because they're the certified dealer for that roof, and so they will kind of expand their bidding area for that type of thing. But I mean, we got fairly good bids on, wasn't the fog seal that was really good bids? That was also an out-of-state firm.
It seems like if it's outside of pavement and earthwork, we'll get more bids. And that's just by nature of what contractors can truly come in and perform that work, so.
And I can't say, I mean, economically, you wouldn't think Spokane would be, I mean, the problem is here where everyone's out of capacity. I mean, if you talk to the contractors, they're not out of capacity. You would think that would be even more so in Spokane and places like that because they're growing so aggressively. But I guess in that growth, they're probably attracting enough labor to kind of keep things balanced. Whereas here, the population growth is almost nil. So we're probably not attracting new laborers to help keep the contractors hungry to have any kind of competition, between them. And sometimes we don't even get bids from who we think we should because they can't afford the people. They just don't have, their book is already too full.
Seems like a no-brainer. Any additional comments, questions? I'll read this one out. Can I have a 3-part motion to increase the scope of the central roofing project to include phase 2 and 3, to increase the budget for the new combined project for an amount not to exceed $1.044 million, and to modify the financial plan as presented in the board packet? Got a motion. Any additional comments or questions? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Nay. And the ayes have it. All right, going around the room, any additional airport authority board comments? Sir?
I'd like to compliment Commissioner Lalonde and Director Faulkner on their socks. I think they're quite lovely, and I've enjoyed looking at them all meeting.
DIA sock.
I wondered.
All right, I have no additional comments. Commissioners. All right.
Additional one. I forgot one thing. Since you've officially announced a date, congratulations to Ron Hall.
Oh, yes. Congratulations.
Riding off into the sunset and leaving us all a little worse off.
2026 will be here before you know
But
Nobody
that's all I
likes a
have.
quitter, Rod. Any additional public comments? Yes,
So, Susan Wolf with the City Commission, I just want to commend all of you for having these difficult conversations in such a positive way. So you can bring up those things, you can talk about it, you can, express your emotions or whatever, and nobody gets hung up on that. So I just want to say thank you.
Appreciate that.
I think a lot of that builds up in the trust we build up in John over the years to do things right, make things right, and not try to.
But I also, I just want to say, it really shows, I think, the professionalism and the knowledge that we have on this board at this time. And I just appreciate how you all work together, and you respect one another, and yet you're willing to make those, ask those hard questions, and have those conversations. So I appreciate it. It's so nice.
Appreciate it. All right.
I just add to that, from the staff perspective, we appreciate it too. I mean, earnestly, you guys have been a great board, and, these are difficult discussions, and that's why we lay them out the way we do, is, we want to ensure that we're giving you the opportunity to weigh in on them, and we appreciate the guidance we get.
All I'm hearing is we're being too nice.
Hey man, you can come down to my office and get some so nice. At least we don't have the public lining up with their BS comments.
You mean valuable input for those
Yes,
online?
exactly.
All right. Well, with no further business to come before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. We'll take 5.
Oh, I was like, look at what time it is. How did that happen? I think that clock is. No, Tom, it.
Oh, I tell you, we're gonna have super chilies going. Oh, well, it makes it interesting, but it's like. It's definitely better than that constant low level.
Doing good. Doing great, ready for the holidays yet, but getting there.
No
You?
one ever really
I
did.
know, I can't believe it's here already.
Go along and not just sit there.
His wife, yeah. I've had jobs.
And I'm just picking up the good ones.